The year was 2047 when it began. A quiet revolution, no battles, no protests, no political upheaval. Just one scientific paper published by an obscure research team in Finland. It was titled, Induced Chlorophyll Integration in Human Dermal Cells, a New Era of Biophotonic Nutrition. A mouthful, but the implications were earth-shattering. At first, no one paid attention. The mainstream media brushed it off. A few fringe blogs picked it up, but it was drowned out by flashier headlines. That changed the moment Dr. Elina Korhonen, one of the lead researchers, stepped onto the TEDx stage in Helsinki. She stood beneath the soft blue lights, a single spotlight highlighting her green-tinged skin. No makeup. No fancy dress. Just a simple sleeveless top and a confident smile. "I haven't eaten a meal in 3 months," she said calmly. "And I've never felt more energized." The audience stared, bewildered. Whispers grew into murmurs. "I'm not starving. I'm photosynthesizing." The silence afterward was heavier than any thunderclap. And just like that, the world leaned in. The new normal. Within months, the phenomenon had a name, the Chlorohuman Project. Labs from Tokyo to Toronto scrambled to replicate the results. It wasn't magic, it was a meticulous integration of synthetic biology and nanotech. Modified chloroplasts, the green energy factories of plant cells, were engineered to survive in human skin. They were woven into dermal layers via microinjections, stabilized by nanobots, and supported by light-sensitive enzymes tailored for human biology. In controlled conditions, an average adult could generate between 400 to 800 calories per day just by basking in sunlight. Enough to meet baseline metabolic needs. With supplements and light-enhanced clothing, even high-performance athletes could thrive. By the end of the year, elite athletes, influencers, and biohackers were lining up for the procedure. They posted photos of themselves meditating on rooftops, jogging in solar-woven gear, basking under UV lamps. A new breed of human was born, green-skinned and glowing with self-sufficiency. Social shift. At first, society split. Green was chic in urban bubbles. Cities like Los Angeles and Berlin built sun parks where people gathered shirtless, arms outstretched like sunflowers. Portable sunbeds became more common than vending machines. A tan was no longer a sign of leisure, it was survival. But in rural regions and conservative cultures, the transformation was taboo. Rumors spread, photosynthesis causes cancer, makes people infertile, steals your soul. Some claimed it was the mark of the beast. "We are not plants," they cried. "We are human." Schools faced heated debates. Should green children be separated from regular ones? Was this a form of genetic elitism? Corporations were quick to capitalize. Solar Skin became a billion-dollar brand overnight, offering everything from chloroplast enhancers to designer photosynthetic tattoos. Their tagline: "Why eat when you can evolve?" The food industry collapse. McDonald's closed 30% of its outlets. Supermarkets reported a 60% drop in fresh produce sales. The global demand for meat, dairy, and grains plummeted. Farmers panicked. Massive food surpluses rotted in silos. Economists tried to stabilize collapsing agricultural economies, but the dominoes kept falling. Hunger statistics dropped, but so did jobs. Entire industries were rendered obsolete in months. Truckers, factory workers, restaurant chains, all left adrift. Food became more of a luxury item. A social marker. The ultra-rich held tasting parties to indulge in cuisine that the photosynthetic majority now saw as primitive. The dark side of green. But it wasn't all paradise. Photosynthesis was efficient, yes, but it required exposure. People started spending hours outside, chasing sunlight like addicts. Sunrushing became a global trend, groups hiking into deserts, mountain peaks, and sun-drenched valleys just to soak up more light. Skin cancer cases spiked, even with chlorophyll's protective layers. The ozone layer, already fragile, now had to withstand billions of human sunbathers. And then there were the energy vampires, those who couldn't produce enough on their own, who resorted to stealing stored chlorocalories from others via black market transfusions. A new class of crime was born. Spiritual awakening. On the flip side, a global movement blossomed, Solarians. A quasi-religious philosophy that revered the sun not as a star, but as the literal source of life and divinity. Temples of soul opened worldwide. Followers gathered each dawn, chanting in harmony, synchronizing their bodies with the rising light. Meditation, breathwork, and exposure became rituals. Food was our original sin, the Solarian scriptures said. Photosynthesis is our redemption. Personal story, Ravi. Ravi was 16 when he got the procedure. His parents were hesitant, old-school chefs who ran a local diner in Mumbai. But Ravi was obsessed with science. He saved for 2 years, working part-time, and booked a budget clinic in Singapore. The change was slow. 4 weeks, his skin itched. Then, the faintest hue of green emerged along his arms. It darkened with each passing week. One morning, he stood shirtless on the rooftop, the golden sun warming his chest, and he felt it. The pulse of energy. The hum in his veins. The fullness that wasn't hunger. School changed. No more cafeteria lines. No more tiffins. Just sun breaks and rooftop hangouts. But then his parents' diner began to empty. Regulars vanished. Orders dropped. His parents never blamed him, but he saw it in their eyes. Ravi stood between two worlds. One rooted in flavor and fire. The other, in light and air. And he wasn't sure where he belonged anymore. The transformation had not just altered individual humans, it was reshaping civilization. A decade into the great photosynthetic shift, global infrastructure was adapting. Concrete jungles of old cities began to transform into veritable greenhouses. Rooftop gardens became essential, not decorative. Massive sun zones were installed in dense urban centers, large open spaces where people gathered to bask in light during peak photosynthesis hours. Governments, recognizing the dramatic drop in food consumption, began reallocating agricultural land. Fields once filled with wheat or corn were now turning into solar farms, reforestation projects, or community parks. Desert regions were rapidly developed, as people began migrating to sunnier climates. The Sahara, once a forbidding wasteland, became a bustling hub of life and commerce. But this green utopia brought with it complex challenges. Energy and productivity rewired. Human metabolism had slowed. While people no longer needed to eat every day, they also had less immediate energy. The light naps, periods of intense stillness in sunlight, became a cultural norm. Entire work schedules shifted. The classic 9-to-5 workday was replaced by a sunrise-to-glow rhythm, with people most productive shortly after their photosynthetic sessions. It created a strange juxtaposition: humans were healthier, but slower. Chronic diseases plummeted. Obesity became virtually extinct. But elite athleticism suffered. Runners, weightlifters, and fighters who once relied on rapid-fire metabolic energy found themselves unable to perform at pre-photosynthesis levels. Sports leagues were forced to adapt: new rules, shorter games, longer rest periods. Economic disruption. The food industry was the first major casualty. With the human diet reduced by nearly 80%, supermarkets shrank. Agriculture-based economies suffered, especially in nations that once exported grains, livestock, or processed goods. Meat consumption nearly vanished, not out of morality, but redundancy. The economic ripple was enormous. Job markets in farming, transport, and food retail collapsed. In response, new industries emerged: BioLite design, solar fashion, clothing that optimized sunlight absorption, and chlorophyll health monitoring. People wore reflective suits, plant-based tunics, and sun-optimized cloaks. Beauty standards evolved. A healthy green hue became desirable, often associated with the vibrancy of photosynthetic health. The rise of solar cities. Cities like Los Angeles, Cairo, and Perth became megahubs, dubbed sun capitals. Urban planning flipped. Instead of building upward, cities built outward to maximize sunlight access. Skyscrapers were deemed outdated, blocking sunlight had become a public health issue. Subterranean spaces, once used for transit or storage, were abandoned. The deeper you lived, the less light you received. Rich elites began moving into specially designed heliodomes. Homes made entirely of sun-capturing glass and photosynthesis-enhancing architecture. These structures followed the sun like giant mechanical sunflowers. Global power shift. Energy became personal. The drop in food and fuel dependence made nations less reliant on imports and global trade. Resource wars decreased, but so did international cooperation. The new economy centered on solar access and light control. Nations near the equator flourished, while northern countries faced decline. Russia, Canada, and Scandinavia saw mass migrations as citizens relocated south in search of year-round sunlight. The United Nations held emergency summits to address solar equity, the emerging divide between the sun-rich and the sun-poor. In response, solar reflectors were launched into orbit, redirecting light to northern regions. It was controversial and expensive, but it helped stabilize the demographic collapse. Spiritual awakening. Religion, too, evolved. Many faiths embraced the change as divine evolution. New spiritual movements formed around the light. Photosynthesis became not only a biological function but a spiritual practice. Light-bathing ceremonies, helio-worship, and meditative sun trances became widespread. Some groups believed that photosynthesis was humanity's way of becoming one with the earth. Others saw it as the beginning of post-human transcendence, a step toward planetary consciousness. But not everyone embraced the shift. The resistance. In the shadows, a counterculture emerged, people who refused to photosynthesize. They called themselves the carnals. Donning blackout clothing and living underground, they ate meat, avoided sun exposure, and railed against the new biology. To them, photosynthesis represented stagnation. It was too slow, too passive. Carnals believed in the power of hunger, adrenaline, and desire. They saw themselves as keepers of the old human fire, literal and metaphorical. Their gatherings were secret, often held at night, featuring fire-cooked meals and whispered rituals under moonlight. Governments tolerated them, barely. They were seen as a curious minority, a fading echo of the past. But to some, they represented a vital question: had humanity traded too much for sustainability? Science pushes forward. Meanwhile, scientists continued experimenting. Geneticists explored enhancements. Could photosynthesis be made more efficient? Could humans store sunlight longer? Could night photosynthesis become real? Breakthroughs came in unexpected forms. A hybrid human-plant embryo was developed, capable of glowing faintly in the dark, powered by stored solar energy. The media dubbed her Solara. She became a symbol, to some, of hope, to others, of horror. And as humanity moved further from its meat-eating, fire-tending past, a question loomed like the shadow of a distant storm. Had this change made humans more harmonious with nature, or just more dependent on it? The world was green, not in color alone, but in philosophy, economics, and culture. With photosynthesis now a core human function, societies had restructured around sunlight. But every utopia breeds its paradoxes. And in this sun-drenched age, the shadows grew longer. The solar dependency crisis. At first, the benefits were obvious. People thrived on sunlight, healthier bodies, fewer diseases, dramatically extended lifespans. But as dependency on the sun increased, so did vulnerability. A massive solar flare in 2082 caused a week-long period of global solar turbulence. It wasn't a full blackout, but the sun's radiation was erratic. The light spectrum was disrupted, enough to destabilize photosynthetic balance. People around the world experienced energy crashes, disorientation, and in extreme cases, organ shutdown. Hospitals filled up. The elderly were hit hardest, unable to store or process erratic sunlight, their systems failed. For the first time in decades, the word famine was spoken again, not due to lack of food, but due to lack of viable light. Governments launched emergency artificial sunlight generators, but it was clear, humanity had tethered its biology to a single star. The dependency had become dangerous. The rise of light banking. Out of the crisis, a new industry emerged, light banking. Massive facilities stored and distributed artificial sunlight to regions experiencing cloudy conditions, solar anomalies, or prolonged winters. It was revolutionary, and instantly controversial. Corporations monopolized the light banks, charging citizens to access premium-grade synthetic sunlight. Subscriptions replaced grocery lists. People measured energy intake in lux credits. The wealthiest glowed with literal health, while the poor dimmed, both figuratively and biologically. Protests erupted. Slogans like, "Light is a right," and "We breathe sun, not paychecks," echoed in the streets. Hackers tried to breach the light networks, releasing bursts of energy into impoverished districts. The United Nations declared universal access to sunlight a human right, but enforcement lagged behind corporate influence. Genetic divergence. With bioengineering booming, a new caste system emerged. People began customizing their photosynthetic profiles. Some added genes from algae that allowed photosynthesis underwater. Others incorporated traits from desert plants, thriving in scorching heat with minimal water. The wealthiest enhanced their skin with reflective membranes that captured up to 90% of available sunlight, solar elites, they were called. Naturally occurring diversity faded. Everyone was optimizing. Children were born with bioengineered chloroplasts, glowing greenish-blue veins, and optimized sun sensors embedded in their skulls. School uniforms came with built-in solar trackers. Exams were held under full-spectrum light for maximum cognitive function. But something intangible was lost. With every edit to the human genome, the boundary between man and plant blurred. Philosophers began to ask, were humans still human? Cultural collapse and rebirth. Art, music, and literature experienced upheaval. Traditional novels were replaced by sun compositions, living gardens arranged in patterns, experienced through meditative stillness. Music relied on photosensitive instruments that changed tone based on the performer's light exposure. Paintings were grown, not painted, living canvases that blossomed under gallery lights. But older generations struggled to adapt. They missed food. They missed fire. They missed darkness. Sleep had become obsolete, but dreams were slipping away with it. Without REM cycles, humanity lost a piece of its subconscious, fewer metaphors, fewer stories, less imagination. A countercultural movement began, the night folk. They sought the return of sleep, of meals, of nighttime introspection. They gathered in underground chambers, blocked out all light, and meditated in pitch darkness. Some even starved themselves of light to induce dreams, a controversial but growing form of spiritual expression. And yet, despite the longing for old ways, evolution pressed forward. The Green Mind Project. By 2095, scientists achieved something unimaginable, full neural solar integration. They discovered that the brain, when saturated with the right spectrum of sunlight, could enter hypercognitive states. Thought accelerated. Memory expanded. Some claimed they could recall entire lifetimes in moments of pure sunlight. Governments poured money into the Green Mind Project, an initiative to create the next leap in human intelligence. Subjects basked in light for hours, guided into focused meditative states. The results were staggering. Mathematical savants solved problems in days that had stumped researchers for decades. Artists created vast living installations, gardens that reacted to human emotion. Diplomats used light-saturated debate chambers to reach peaceful conclusions. But with greater thought came heavier burdens. Some participants experienced light dissonance, a mental collapse caused by too much clarity. They saw patterns in everything, felt the weight of the earth's suffering, and wept for the sun's slow death, billions of years in the future. These were the sun-mad, prophets, poets, or broken souls, depending on whom you asked. One of them, a woman named Isla Toma, etched her visions into a solar stone, a crystalline diary that glowed brighter with each tragedy she foresaw. She predicted that the final phase of humanity wouldn't be physical, but luminous. Her final words: "We won't die. We'll dissolve into light itself."